Hello, everyone. I am so glad you could make it. Welcome to my webinar where we're going to talk about how to add a second dwelling unit and create some extra income using ADUs. So just a minute, I'm just getting things set up. Be patient, please. Okay, we are excellent. Okay, thank you, Mark. Getting me off started on the right foot here, so I appreciate that. Okay, let's get going here. My name's Mike Smith. I'm an architect, and I just want to thank you for being here. I am absolutely thrilled to be able to share this information that I have and such. But before we get started, I want to first make sure that you can hear me. So if you can find the chat, let's see. And you will find that under the more on your screen. Go to the chat and let me know if you can hear me. Oh, sorry. Okay, great. Thank you, Larry. That's great. Kate, appreciate that. Jim, George, Robert, awesome. Okay, fantastic. Next, it's really important is that you can see my slides. I was doing this a little while ago, and I think I talked for about 10 minutes before I realized there was no slides on the screen. So if you can see my slides, go ahead and put a yes in there. Awesome. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Larry. Mona, outstanding. Okay. Well, great. Well, welcome. Before we get started here, just one last little bit is I've been practicing, I've been working on it. I'm going all out, and I really would like your full attention. And I know there's distractions around. So if you're not watching this webinar on your phone, I'd like to ask you to put it on silent and in fact, put it away. And that's what I'm doing right now. I'm putting it in a drawer to where I can't see any of the notifications. So if you can do that, I appreciate it. Also, if you're on your laptop or on a desktop computer and you've got maybe a couple other programs open, you know, if I can ask you to close those down, because I tell you, give me about 30, 40 minutes here, and I'm going to tell you just about everything you need to know about ADUs, and I'm going to be around to answer any of your questions and such. So if we can do that, that would be great. I appreciate that. All right, so that I can serve you better, I'd like to get to know you a little bit and maybe just have a little bit of fun. So if you could tell me where you're tuning in from and what beverage you're having right now, go ahead and put that in the chat also. Okay, Jim is having water and he lives in Los Osos. Okay. Dave is also from not also, but in San Luis Obispo and has nothing right now. Mark, I love that. Mark is in Atascadero having a little Chardonnay. It is after 6, so after I finish, I'll probably join you. So great. Kate is from San Luis Obispo and she's having water. Patty is from Cayucas having a little coffee. And then finally, Mona is in San Luis Obispo and she's also having a glass of wine. So that's great. Larry having some tea. Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate that. You know, it's great to get to know you and have a little fun before we get started, but also there's an ulterior motive because now you know where the chat box is. And as we go through and questions come up in your mind, go ahead and put them in the chat, and I will answer those at the end and such. But also share with your aha moments. If there's something like, oh, I didn't realize that, that really kind of helps me, because I'm kind of watch things go up, and so if there's something like that that you discover, that just kind of helps me and keeps my energy up, because I want to give you the best possible information we can. So without further ado, let's get started. So who is this? This webinar is for who? And I've broken down into 3 groups. A, you want to create extra income. B, you're looking to provide temporary housing for your adult children or loved ones. Or C, you want to increase the value of your property. So if you could put in the chat box which one you're here to learn about, A, B, or C, I'd appreciate that. Okay, let's see. John says he's an A. George says all of the above. Okay, Mark, same thing, all of the above. Larry, A and C. Kate is B and C. Robert is A and B. And Mona said all 3. Okay, awesome. That is fantastic. Well, I am going to show you how we can do that. So tonight you're going to discover how to create extra income with your ADU, how an ADU can be for family living, and how an ADU can increase your property value. Now, one of the things, I don't know if you have gone through and tried to add an ADU in your property, and you go down to San Luis Obispo County Planning Department, and most likely, unless you had a large property, they told you couldn't do it, or that the process is long and messy. Well, obviously that's not your fault. And that is one thing that is great about tonight, because that all ends today. So let's first go over what is an ADU. I know there was a post on Facebook that said, hey, what's an ADU? We don't know what that is. And that's probably because, that's not probably, because if you're here, you know what an ADU is, you've heard it in the news and such. So it's kind of like a qualifier. But an ADU is nothing more than a secondary dwelling unit. Also call it cottage or granny unit. And the reason why it is we call it an ADU, which stands for accessory dwelling unit. And when Governor Brown signed into law back in 2017, the ability for homeowners to add a separate unit on their single family resident property, he legalized the term accessory dwelling unit. Well, it's kind of a mouthful, and us architects and in the building trade, we tend to want to shorten things up. So we shorten that down to ADU, and that's kind of stuck. Now, the reason why Governor Brown signed this law was a response to the lack of housing in California and the high cost of housing. So the law in 2017 removed all those barriers that local planning departments had in place. Now, we've been living with this law since 2017, and Governor Newsom actually signed into law additional changes, lowering the barriers even more, and that went into effect January of this year, and created a new category called junior ADU. So that's what that JADU is for, and we'll be talking about that. But first, okay, why should you listen to me? Well, first off, I'm a licensed architect in California, have been for over 30 years. I've designed many ADUs in San Luis Obispo County, though they weren't necessarily called ADUs, and I'll go into that a little bit later. You'll understand that. And I know the codes, the ordinances, and the process to design and build ADUs. So back in 2017, when the governor signed the law, there was a mad rush in a lot of local cities and such to rewrite their laws, adjusting and aligning to the new law. Well, what do you think San Luis Obispo County's response was? Absolutely nothing. They did not feel that they needed to do that because they had a cottage ordinance. And in their mind, that was enough. Well, the cottage ordinance was very limited. It allowed you to build a separate unit, but it could only, have a bedroom and a bathroom. It was limited to 600 square feet, and it could not have a full kitchen. It had what we now call an efficiency kitchen. And that is, the sink is a bar size, and the refrigerator is an under counter, and it could have no stove. So it was very limiting. You couldn't obviously rent it out because it wasn't a separate unit. So very few ADUs were added after the law changed. Well, that has now changed because now that the new laws that Gavin Newsom signed, all counties have been, again, rewriting their ordinances to bring them in line. And San Luis Obispo County has decided that now is the time to do that. So we are actually in a bubble where the county, San Luis Obispo County, is operating within under state law. They threw out their cottage ordinance that they'd been using since 2017, and we're now operating under state law, which is a little more forgiving, a little more there's less requirements than what San Luis Obispo County had. And they're doing this until the new ordinance has been approved and enacted. And according to their website, that is supposed to happen February 28th. I've not been able to find anything in any of the supervisors' notes and such that they have approved the new ordinance. But if you are on this webinar and you're thinking of doing an ADU, most likely by the time you finish the design and are ready to submit for a permit, we're going to be under the new ordinance. And so we do know what the draft ordinance is. And in fact, I'll go over that a little bit. And while I want you to take lots of notes and such, I don't want you to worry about getting all the nuances that I may mention during this presentation, because one of the things I'm going to send out is to you, since you registered for this webinar, is a summary of the ADU regulations for San Luis Obispo County, the city of San Luis Obispo, Paso Robles, Pismo Beach, and Aurora Grande. So you will have the broad strokes of the ADU policies for each of those cities and the county itself. Okay, so let's look at how can you use an ADU? Well, of course, you can use it as a rental unit. That is probably the primary reason that the original law was put into place, to get more housing on the market for California. You can also use it for family housing, and then of course you can have it for space for guests. So before we go on with my presentation, I'd like you to get to know me a little bit, get to understand where I'm coming from and such. So you would think, being an architect and a noble profession like being an architect, that I would have some kind of extraordinary story of why I'm an architect. Well, I'm sorry to burst your bubble, that is not the case. My story on why I became an architect is anything but noble. I wanted to become an architect because Michael Brady on the Brady Bunch. Yes, Michael Brady from the Brady Bunch, a TV show in the 70s that I can remember sitting down once a week with my family to watch the adventures of Mike and Carol Brady with their 6 children. I could relate to the troubles of having brothers and sisters since we had 4. And sometimes I think it would have been nice to have a housekeeper like Alice. But Michael Brady seemed to make his own hours working from home. He had a great house. Well, looking back, a great house based on what a 9-year-old thought was a great house. He had a great family, and he drove a Corvette. And that looked like the lifestyle for me. So I think that was the first nugget that went in my head as I was growing up, and it led me to architectural drafting in high school and choosing Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo to go to school. But along the way, I really had some hard knocks to develop into the architect I am today. My first mentor was a principal at my first architectural firm after I graduated, and I took a job at a really small firm in San Francisco. It was so small, it was just the principal, a project manager, and myself. That meant I had a lot of responsibility early in my career. It also meant I worked directly with the principal of the firm. And he had some very different ideas of looking at contractors. He would always describe the contractor as this big, hairy gorilla with their knuckles dragging along the ground. And this was a visual image that stuck in my head for the early years of my career. This attitude was a problem, though, when I opened my own office. When I left that first firm and started my own practice, I think I was a typical architect, thinking I knew everything. I knew more than the homeowner. I know, of course, knew more than a contractor when it came to design. And I carried that attitude as I walked on job sites for my project. Well, as you can imagine, carrying this kind of arrogant attitude on the job site during construction only created friction with the contractor and problems for the homeowner. One particular project comes to mind wherein I had many heated discussions with the contractor over changes he was suggesting. It was so bad that after the project was complete, I overheard the homeowner telling her friends that the construction turned out well and she was pleased with it, but the whole process was a nightmare and she would never do another home remodeling project again. These words crushed me. I love the whole design and construction process. I think there's nothing better than walking through a home under construction and seeing the new spaces that are taking shape. I wanted my clients to feel the same way, but to hear one of my clients talk about their experience and how horrible it was crushed my soul. And knowing that I was one of the reasons why it was like that. It was at that moment that I realized I needed to do better. I needed to do better for my clients, for my projects, and I realized that the best way to do that was to bring a better attitude to the project. I wasn't going to be like other architects that let their ego get in the way of a client's experience. I was going to change how I interacted with the homeowner and the contractor and bring a team approach to my project. And that I bring that commitment to every project I do now. That's exactly what I did for Peggy Lee. She lived or was moving from Idaho to the California Central Valley, and she wanted a mountain house just like she had in Idaho. And the problem was we were building this mountain house on probably the flattest land you can find in the Central Valley. And it did have its challenges. It was a long, thin site and such. But the great thing that we did is Peggy, after hiring me, we worked on hiring the contractor, and we worked as a team to develop this house, which took over 32 months because of planning approval issues and other things. But it turned out fantastic. There were many challenges through it. I mean, it was a 4,100 square foot house, and there were many challenges, but we all worked together to solve those challenges, and it actually was a wonderful project. Okay, so before we move on, let's address the elephant that's in the room. I'm sure you're all thinking about it. What does an ADU cost? Well, I will tell you right now, it is an investment. But before we go in and talk about what the costs are, there are cost factors that I want to go over, because I can't just tell you it's going to be the X amount of dollars and let you think, oh, it's this size or this this many square feet, or it's on a flat side. There's so many issues. So I want to kind of give you a baseline. So what affects the cost? Well, obviously the size of the structure that you're going to build. The slope of the site. If it's a flat site, that's probably the easiest construction we can have. We can have a slab on grade, as opposed to a hilly site. Now we have a raised foundation and such. Location of the property within the county. There are certain areas in the county that require maybe an archaeological study, that need a geological study or a botanical study. I've come across that on a number of projects. So knowing that type of foundation, that goes back to the slope of the site. It also will be addressed with the soil that your property is on and such. So these all are things that affect the price of your particular ADU. Quality of construction and materials. If you're looking for just a rental and it's got to be something brute force, that's a different kind of material than if you're doing more for a family member and you want it to match maybe closer to your house. And then the use of the ADU, and that kind of goes back to what I said about whether it's a rental or for a family member. Okay, so let's go over some assumptions. First, we're going to say that it's 1,000 square feet and it's on a flat site. There are no soil challenges. So it's a typical flat site where we have good soil. We don't have to do anything exotic in terms of a foundation. The materials are going to match the existing house, and we may upgrade a few areas like in the kitchen or the bathroom. And we're building this ADU for my mother to come and stay with us. So cost, 1,000 square feet, brand new structure on a flat site, you're probably looking in the range of $250 a square foot. So you're $250,000 for your structure. Architectural fees will range depending on the complexity of the project and design. Most of them, if it's 1,000 square feet on the flat site, you're looking at about $15,000. That's not just architectural fees, that will include structural engineer. That's probably 90% of the projects I do have those two. Sometimes we need to bring in a civil engineer, so that cost goes up a little bit. It's a rare case that I would need to bring in an electrical or mechanical engineer. Plan check fees, right now the county has a set fee for cottage and ADUs, and it runs about $4,500 to $5,000. I know when we have the new ordinance in place, I'm sure they're going to update their costs. And so I don't know what that is yet. And once we do, I will certainly let everyone know there's on this webinar about that. School fees, every new structure, in fact, every addition onto a house over 500 square feet needs to pay school fees. So if you have 1,000 square feet, the average school fee, which is paid, it's a dollar amount per square foot, it's about $3.70 in the county, depending on the school district. They all vary a little bit, but you're looking about $3,700 for that. And then there's some miscellaneous fees like encroachment fees and such that might be another $500. But you're essentially looking at an investment of $300,000 to build that. Now, I say that to you and you may go, oh, wow, that's a lot of money. My job at this point is not to make you all warm and cozy with the idea. It's actually to scare you a little bit. And I want to scare you at this point, as opposed to spending money on my fees and we get to the end of the project and we get the bids, and we find out that, oh, we thought it was going to be more like 200,000, and it ends up being 300,000, and it's a surprise. So that's why I always like to get the contractor involved as soon as we can, so that we have someone who actually swings a hammer, who can give us some feedback on pricing as we go along. So just an example, we did an ADU in Napomo, and we actually finished it in 2019. And though I call it an ADU, when we put it in, when we designed it and submitted for a building permit, we actually had to call it a cottage. Though this particular homeowner had an acre site, and you would think it would be big enough for an ADU, because it had a septic system on it, the county would not let us build an ADU. We had to design it as a 600 square foot cottage. So instead of having a 2-bedroom, 1-bath with a kitchen, which is what the homeowner wanted, we designed it as a 600 square foot, 1-bedroom, 1-bath with a kitchenette, so no stove. But we had all the plumbing in place and a partially covered porch, because we knew this ordinance was coming. So now that now that they've thrown out the old one and we're under state law, we're going back in and doing a small permit for a remodel to enclose the porch and put in the kitchen. So a little, we had to work around some things, but the homeowner really wanted to get it in place. They had a family member who was moving from the East Coast, so we couldn't wait for the ordinance. But now soon they will have an 850 2-bedroom, 1-bath ADU. Okay, so adding an ADU to your property and increase its value. So we've talked a little bit about it. So I'd like to know, are you in? Is this something that you're still interested in doing? Go ahead and put in the chat box if you are. Let's see, we've got John says he's in. Mark says yes. George, great, says yes. Jeff, yes. Larry's still under consideration. Hey, that's what we're here to do, to answer that. That's great. Robert, yes. Okay, excellent. Thank you, everyone. Okay, so let's go over what we're going to be discussing here. We're going to go over bringing in how we can bring in some extra income by adding the ADU and or a junior ADU, because that is something that is still, that kind of blows my mind. But when I go through it, you'll understand a little bit here. Using an ADU, how we can maximize your property investment. We're going to go over all the requirements and limitations of an ADU and a junior ADU, and how you can provide temporary housing for your adult children, or a place for maybe mom or dad who still wants to have independent living, but you want to keep them close by. So how are we going to do that? Well, let me tell you a story about how I've developed a system, what I call the ADU system. And the first part of that, the A, stands for authority. So the authority that the state and the county is now giving us to design ADUs on our property. No longer are they, when it was passed in 2017, the ADU had some funky math that it had to go with. You were allowed to put an ADU up to 1,200 square feet was the max, but it was half the square footage of the main house. So what does that mean? If you had a 2,000 square foot main house, you could do a 1,000 square foot ADU. If you had a 3,000 square foot main house, you could do a 1,200 square foot ADU. So that was the math that you had to kind of work through. So it kind of penalized you if you happen to have a smaller house on your lot and you still had room for a larger unit. That law wiped out all the planning, well, just about all the planning restrictions and limitations. It still has a lot coverage. And what that refers to is, say your lot is 5,000 square feet and you have a 50% lot coverage ratio. That means you could build structures that cover 2,500 square feet of the lot. So those are still in place. But the big one it wiped out was parking. That was the planning department's big stick. And why so many or so few ADU and cottages were built? Because if you put a separate unit on your property, you had to provide parking for it. And you think, okay, I have a big enough front yard. My driveway is 30 feet wide, so I could put 2 cars. I could put 3 cars across there. Unfortunately, the planning department would say no to that. They didn't count any parking within the first 20 feet of the property, what we call the setback. That's typically where your garage sits. So it had to be somewhere on the property outside the setback. Well, typical lots in California are narrow and deeper, and the house is usually within 5 to 10 feet of that front setback line. Not enough space for a parking space, let alone the fact that who wants to park in their front yard? So that limited a lot. I can't even tell you the percentage. But that's been wiped out. As long as your property is within a half mile of public transit, you don't have to provide parking. So you can go with, in the driveway or on the street. And the permit requirements have been relaxed. They have a time frame of, they have to give you an answer on your permit within 60 days. So they're trying to shorten up the time frame, which is outstanding. Love that. Okay, so D of my ADU system stands for design. So the location and size of ADUs and junior ADUs. Like I said, the calculation that we used before, that's out. Right now, it doesn't matter what the size of the main house is. You can build a 1,200 square foot ADU, detached ADU, even attached. So that gives you a lot more freedom. Now, the draft ordinance that we've seen from San Luis Obispo County, they're going to limit that to 1,000 square feet for certain size properties. So that's just a little bit, but we can still make that work. But one of the exciting things about it is the junior ADU. You can have the main house, and if you can carve out up to 500 square feet within the confines of that house, you can put in a junior ADU. And some of the things you may be thinking, well, why do I want to carve up my house? Well, one of the keys that, or one idea is in Cayucas, we did one that where you've got these steep slopes and the house is up on the level with the street, but there's a full-on basement underneath. That basement could be turned into an ADU. Now, just because you convert part of your house into an ADU, it does not preclude you from having a detached ADU. So certain properties have the potential of being a triplex. The main house, the junior ADU, which is limited to 500 square feet, and then the ADU that's up to 1,000 square feet in San Luis Obispo County. So that's mind-blowing and gives homeowners a lot of options and such. So we're also going to work on designing so we're enhancing the property. Obviously, if we're going to have this ADU in the backyard, we want to make sure that there's access from the street. And if it's for a rental, it also, you could be putting it in for temporary housing or for loved ones. So we would design it so that it enhances your backyard and such. So there's lots of options we can do with that. And then the last thing is utilities. You are not required to put separate utilities to the ADU. You don't have to put separate sewer, water, or electrical for it. And that can save you quite a bit of money on connection fees and such. And one other thing, San Luis Obispo County is very aggressive in getting fire sprinklers into homes. In fact, if you remodel your home or do a combination of a remodel and addition, that's over 50% of the area of the house, CAL FIRE will require that you put in fire sprinklers. But if you are doing an ADU and the main house does not have fire sprinklers, you do not need to put in fire sprinklers for the ADU. So that's a great thing about that. Okay, and then U of the ADU system is utilization. So of course, you're going to be able to rent it, get rental income. And depending on where you are in the county, that could be upwards of $800 to $1,500 a bedroom. Kind of outrageous, but that's why they're doing it, to bring in more rental units. So you have that option. The short-term rental market is a little more difficult to do. Usually in the county, you need to have a permit. And in order to have a permit, you have to go through a conditional use, get a conditional use permit, which is another planning review process. Can take anywhere from 3 to 6 months, but it'll notify your neighbors around you that you're thinking of doing like an Airbnb, and they get an opportunity to voice whether they think that's a good idea or not. And I've seen homeowners who have tried to do it with their main house and have been denied. And I think, you know, that the main house, the neighbors probably have a little tougher time with that because the homeowner is gone and they've got a stranger now living next door to them. We might find that the ADU might be a little easier because the homeowner is still in the home and they're renting out a separate unit. So that's something that I haven't had anybody come up with yet and try that, but that's something that we're certainly going to see along the way. And then we can certainly have the unit for family and friends and such. Okay, so now that we've gone through and you've seen what the ADU requirements and the limitations are, see how we can get some extra income, how we could provide separate living space for mom and dad and some extra living space for other family members and such. Do you want an ADU? So if you do, you're still interested, why don't you go ahead and put yes in the chat box there. Okay, George, yes, is still interested. Thank you, George. I appreciate that. Mark says, of course, the payback is still in an 8 to 10 year range. Thank you. That is true, Mark. I appreciate that. Robert says yes. Okay, excellent. So I want to give you a couple examples that I've had with clients. And one is the Torres. This actually was an ADU. It was on a larger lot, so we were able to do it. In fact, the lot was 10 acres. So they had lots of room, and they wanted to put in a 1,200 square foot ADU that they were looking ahead for retirement. And so they wanted something that as they were winding down their work life, that they could still have income coming from other sources. So they built a 1,200 3-bedroom, 2-bath ADU. And in fact, they put it over a 600 square foot garage, which you can do. If you have the space, you can do a garage that allow you to do a 600 square foot garage. And then I'm working with the Jacobsons, who have their son is developmentally challenged, but not to the point where he wants to have an independent lifestyle, and they want to give him that, but they want to keep him close by. So we're building, designing an ADU on her property so she can provide that for her son. And then we have the Osers. They had a garage that had a storage space above. Space was all built out, had the exterior walls, and we're coming in and remodeling in the upstairs, adding 2 bedrooms and a bath so they can rent it out and get some extra income. So I know I've gone over a lot, and you may still be a little confused of what's your next step. You know, what do I do first? How do I add an ADU to my property? Well, of course, there's always 2 ways. There's a slow way that you go down there, try to find out the information from the planning department, the building department, and such, and hope you get the right information, because there are some, there are some little niches and such that you need to work through. Or you can do it the fast way, and I'm going to give you an opportunity that we can work together on getting you that. Of course, this is not going to be for everyone. If you are a DIY person and you want to do it on your own, that's great. I can still help you navigate along the way. And it's what I call my home profit playbook. It's what I use for my residential projects. I'm offering that to everyone on the webinar here, and it's going to walk you through how adding an ADU to your property. So let me just go over what is in it. We're going to do a property research. So for your particular property, we're going to find out exactly what the limitations and restrictions you have on your property. We're going to have a planning summary, so we'll know exactly what the planning department will allow. We'll develop a customized ADU plan for you and a project timeline. You will also get an opportunity to meet with me. My team and I put the research together, but I will meet with you and go over the information, and we will review your options. So I'm offering a consultation with me, and I'm going to give you an opportunity to sign up. And if you do, I'm going to throw in a bonus of what I call the ADU Dream Book. And it's basically a place where you can keep all your ideas and notes together in one place. So what do you think that would be worth to you? Well, I'm going to keep it really easy. It's going to be free. I really like helping people, and I get a lot of questions from homeowners that they just don't know what to do first. It can be complicated talking to a planner and asking the right questions. Well, I've done it for 30 years, and I know what questions to ask. So I can certainly do it a lot quicker, and I want to help you with it. But I also want to make sure you understand I'm not here to waste your time. I'm giving you a 100% satisfaction guarantee. And I know you're thinking, well, Mike, this is free. What's there to guarantee? I think your time is valuable, and I don't want to waste it. So at the end of our 60-minute consultation, if I haven't given you what you think is valuable enough, I will put my money where my mouth is, and I will give you a gift certificate to a local restaurant. So I'm willing to put up, because I know the information I'm going to give you will be useful for you and will help you decide if you want to go forward or not. And of course, I'm hoping you'll choose me as your architect, but I'm not relying on that. So let's just review what's in my home profit playbook. We're going to do a property research. We're going to do a planning worksheet or summary. We're going to put together a customized plan. We're going to have a project timeline, and you're going to get a 60-minute consultation with me. So I want you to imagine being able to bring in extra monthly income with your ADU, or temporary housing for your children or loved one, and increase your property value. So if you sign up while I'm answering questions, because we're going to get to your questions at the end, if you sign up during this and let me know, I'm going to throw in a copy of my best-selling book, How to Avoid Home Remodeling Hell. So I told you in my story how that homeowner said she would never do another home remodeling project again. Well, I frequently would go to parties, and when people hear that I'm an architect, there's usually someone in the group that wants to tell me about their home remodeling horror story. And so I was so tired of that. I wrote a book, and it's quick little read, but it gives you about 8-10 steps, ideas. If you follow that, you will have a much better experience. So what are you going to do? You're going to go to letsgettogethernow.com, and you will see this page, which gives you the summary of what I'm going to provide for you. And you hit that red button to request a one-on-one, and you'll be taken to my calendar. And so the light blue is times that are available. You go through, you pick a time, a date and a time, and then that will set up your time to meet. So I hope this was valuable to you. I hope it was educational, and I hope you'll take advantage of my opportunity or my offer to meet with me, and I'll provide you the information you need for your particular property. So that ends, oh, sorry. One thing I want to make sure is if you go to the link, I know I talked about the ADU regulations and requirements for SLO County and the surrounding cities. If you go to this, I will put it in the show. Just one second. Okay, you can go to that. You can get the county requirements. That's the summary for the county. And once I see you've got that, I'll send you the whole book. We've just updated it, finished it today, and so I wasn't able to get it up on the site. But that'll tell me you're wanting that. Also, if there's something on here you want to hear again, you want to go through. Oh, that's not showing up. Okay. One second. Sorry about that. Okay. Let me work on that, Larry. I'm sorry. It's supposed to go out to everybody, but it is not. So, let me try that. How about that? Did that work? Looks like it should. No. Okay, I'll get to that in a moment. Let me just wrap this up for people who need to jump off. But I've recorded this webinar, and I will be posting it in the next couple hours, and I'll send you a link to that shortly. So that is the end of my presentation. I thank you so much for being here. If there are any questions, go ahead and type them in the Q&A box, and I will answer them. I've got one in here. I've actually got two. I don't know if Robin is on the line. Let's see. Looks like she's not. But Robin posted a question on the Facebook page, where the thank you page, and she was wondering about the city of San Luis Obispo and the requirement that owner occupied for ADUs. That's one of the things that is in the state law, is you need to be an owner occupied to do the ADU, but that only held in place for 5 years. And then after that, you could move off the property and go somewhere else. San Luis Obispo County has dropped that. you do not need to be an owner occupied to do an ADU. If you're going to do a junior ADU, they do. That is a requirement. So that's one thing that is different between city and county. But the city of San Luis Obispo does not require the owner to occupy the property to do an ADU. Okay, I got a question here from Mark. Let's see, even if the ADU is at 1,000 square feet or higher, I thought CAL FIRE required an additional structure over 1,000 square feet required sprinklers. Does the ADU have an exception in the county? That is something that we have found, we're seeing in the draft ordinance, is they're not requiring it for the ADU if it's detached, and the main house does not have sprinklers. Now, that I've got to say that with a little caveat, because they could always, this is draft, it's not the final, and they could always come in and say, nope, we want to have fire sprinklers even if the main house is not. Also, if you are remodeling the main house and you put in an ADU at the same time, I don't know yet, but that could possibly trigger, if that remodel or addition on the main house is over 50%, that could trigger sprinklers for both the main house and the ADU. So there are still some areas that we're working through, and as we see more situations, we'll see that. Okay, Mark has another question. In Paso Robles, there is a moratorium for vacation rentals. Okay, how does this affect vacation rentals with ADUs versus house for rent? You know, Mark, that's a great question. I don't know. That's something I'm going to have to ask about that. Like I said, this is all kind of new, and we don't know how each city's handling it. But right now, Paso Robles is basically just following state law, but I haven't asked them about that. So I will do that, and I will we'll keep everyone posted. Let's see. Larry is saying, my understanding is that the city of San Luis Obispo requires a covenant with the permit that runs with the land in perpetuity, that the property always has an owner occupied, one of the two units, the original or the ADU. Larry, that was correct, but I believe it was February 6th, San Luis Obispo, the city of San Luis Obispo revised their ordinance, and they dropped that from the ordinance. In fact, when Robin's question came in, I went down and I talked to Cassidy at the front counter and confirmed that with her. And so what she said is, if you have a detached or attached ADU, you're not required to be owner occupied. There's no covenant, there's nothing required for that. However, if you are going to do a junior ADU, they do require the owner occupied. And when I asked her, I said, hey, why is that? I don't quite understand that. And the only thinking she could come up with was that that's more in line with what the original ordinance. And since it's within the house, they wanted to keep that continuity. Though the detached side, they said, you know, it was going to be a problem for them to enforce the owner occupied for the ADU. So they just decided to drop it. So that is up to date. I mean, I went down at 2 o'clock and got that. Okay, Maria, do you work with Santa Maria Orchid residents or only in San Luis Obispo County? Maria, I have a car, so I drive everywhere. I've had clients in Santa Barbara. I have clients in Modesto. So if you need help, please reach out to me. We'd love to help you. George, can you address the overriding of CC&Rs? You know, George, that's more of a legal issue, and my guess would be is state law is going to trump that because they wiped out all the planning restrictions, but I don't know that. So, you know, these couple questions that I'm not sure about, I'll find out and we'll post. I'll probably send out a general broadcast to your emails once I get that. So I'm sorry I don't know that, but that, you know, these are all great questions. And I really appreciate everyone taking time to put that in there, but I will find that out. Okay. Any other questions? Well, that being said, I certainly hope you take advantage of my offer. I'd love to help you out, give you some clarity on what you can do and such. I'm here to help because I've heard it from homeowners before. They, you know, sometimes they think it's intimidating talking to an architect and they're afraid about fees and such. Now that's why I'm offering this 60-minute consultation. So go to letsgettogethernow.com, sign up, and I'll be happy to help you out. If questions come up after this, you can always drop me an email, mike@michaelsmitharchitect.com. And thank you so much. And we'll close it out. And you guys have a great evening.